Okay, we've heard from Councilwoman McCray. She is experiencing technical difficulties, and she hopes to be on the call within the next 5 to 10 minutes. But we have a quorum with Councilman Burnett, who is here. So we're going to get started and let her join us in progress. My name is Bill Henry. I'm the councilman for the 4th District, chair of the council's Equity and Structure Committee. Thank you for joining me here on WebEx for a virtual meeting of the Equity and Structure Committee. In attendance, we have Council President Brandon Scott, members of the committee, Councilman Burnett, Vice Chair of the Committee of the 8th District. I believe we also have Councilwoman Mary Pat Clark from the 14th District, and Councilman Yitzi Schleifer from the 5th District, and Councilwoman Shannon Sneed from the 13th District. We are also joined on the call by Dominic McAlilly of the Council President's Office, Jim Knighton of the Comptroller's Office, and Matt Segman representing the Mayor's Office. We will be starting with City Council 19-0382, Charter Amendment, City Administrator. This is a charter amendment introduced by Council President Scott. It has had previous hearings, but today's work session is mainly to consider amendments being proposed by the Council President. Mr. President, would you like to start off with that?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm bringing them up on another device here, so I don't have to look in 2 different places. So these amendments are really simple. Sam is bringing them up. I'll give everybody a second. Essentially, as you guys know, when I started off in this mission a long time ago to bring Baltimore in alignment with most major cities and, quite honestly, all counties in Maryland, with the exception of us and 2 others, to actually have a professional administrator role that is required by charter in there, so that there's a separation. This is something that exists just to our south in Washington, D.C., obviously in Baltimore County, Howard, Hartford, Anne Arundel, Montgomery, Prince George's, Calvert, St. Mary's. The list goes on and on. These amendments are essentially to bring Baltimore in line with the jurisdictions around us, and having the administrator be a position that will be approved by the council, like most agency heads, fired by the mayor, like most agency heads. It does still have some basic requirements for the position to make sure that we're getting appropriate person with the appropriate experience and understanding and ability to do this work, similar to how we have for health commissioner, police commissioner, etc., that we have inside of either public code or public local law or the charter in some instances. That's what these amendments do. Is about making sure, again, that we are changing Baltimore city government to be a 21st century structured government where we can build best practices of more accountability, more efficiency, more effectiveness as we move into the next term, where we're going to be pushing those kind of structural changes to city government. We cannot continue to be out of alignment with the rest of the free world. The city is essentially a $3 billion business or entity, and you will not find a $3 billion business or entity that does not separate the role of the chief executive and the chief administrator. So these amendments go to that effect. They answer a lot of the questions and concerns that was had by finance and the law department and others, to simply make us be in alignment with Washington, D.C., Baltimore County, and the other jurisdictions.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know that we had conversations many times over the years about your interest in this position, and I'm very excited about seeing this come to fruition. I had suggested a minor amendment to your proposed amendments. I discussed that with Kaylin earlier this morning. This was an issue that had come up at one of the previous hearings on this bill. There is a passage on the second page. Sam, if you want to scroll up to page 2 of this, right there in section 7, records, reports, C, annual report, other information, paragraph 2. Upon request of the mayor, and then this bill added the city administrator and the city council. Every municipal agency shall promptly supply the mayor, the city administrator, the city council with all requested information with respect to the practice and proceedings of the agency. This is a really basic open and transparent government provision, which frankly, I suspect most people in Baltimore assumed that this was already the case. Kind of like my colleague from the 14th district was saying the other day in reference to the charter amendment for letting the council move money around in the budget. There are often times when we find that the city charter doesn't actually give the power that people expect that it gives the different sections of government. I know that it had been brought to the committee's attention that there were concerns that by leaving the city council in this, we were violating the one subject rule for the bill. What I thought I remembered from that conversation was that was more of an issue of needing to also make a similar correction to the purpose clause to make it clear that the bill was doing this broader openness and transparency effort. And so I suggested such an amendment to CallIns, and DLR is working on that, in which this provision would be restored, and we would also add the comptroller so that it would read, upon request of the mayor, the city administrator, the city council, or the comptroller. And then we can strike Board of Estimates because at that point, we've already addressed all the electeds that are on the Board of Estimates. Every municipal agency shall promptly supply the mayor, the city administrator, the city council, or the comptroller with all requested information with respect to the practice and proceedings of the agency. I understand that DLR has managed to incorporate that amendment into the package of amendments that the council president's office has already provided. But this would be the first chance we've had since doing that to talk to the law department about it. And so actually what I'm going to do is I can't see all the participants. Here we go. I see Vic. Is Tony DeFranco on this call?
Mr. Chair, I want to, in addition to Tony, I want to see what Law has to say. I see Elena on here too.
I see Elena and Vic. What I was looking for was if Tony was on the call, I was going to ask him to email the amendment to Vic and Elena. But what I'm going to instead do is ask Casey to email Tony and ask him to do that. So that, I mean, I've just read it out loud. Elena or Vic?
We have received them. We have received them. Yep.
Did you have any additional questions or concerns about that?
I'm going to let Vic speak to this because he's more familiar with it.
Okay, Vic? You're muted, Vic.
Yeah, I'm just seeing these amendments now, Mr. Chair. So let me.
Sure.
I understand what the thing is, and I understand what the problem would be and what we're trying to fix. just give me a moment here while I look through it.
Well, what we'll do is we'll continue on. Mr. President, was there anything else in particular about the amendments that we needed to discuss or share with the committee, or should I at this point go to, oh, we've been joined by Councilwoman McCray. Good to see you, Councilwoman, or good to see that you're there. Or should I just ask the committee now if the committee has questions?
So I just wanted to highlight one other thing, Mr. Chair, is that we did originally in the drafting of this bill, it had some agency heads, changed agency heads to be appointed by the administrator. The other big significant thing is that it's being stricken out, and that's going to remain with the mayor. DGS was one of those, so that person will still be appointed by the mayor. That is the other big significant one. Other than that, it's just essentially the amendments are exactly what I said. It makes us in alignment with DC and the county, as the person is essentially an agency head that's hired and fired by the mayor, but has the responsibility of quote unquote being the operational person for city government, like it is in Baltimore County. But in adding for us still having for qualifications, which is something that is.
Okay.
Could I ask a question?
Just a moment, Councilwoman. I'm trying to move the chat box field so it's not over the president's face, which makes it hard. There we go. All right, there we go. Councilwoman, I was actually going to check with the committee members first to see if there were any questions from Councilman Burnett or Councilwoman McCray.
I don't have anything on this provision.
Okay, Councilwoman McCray?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay, then we'll go to other council members, starting with Councilwoman Clark.
First of all, my apologies. I was reading while the president was talking. So, but I was reading the very issues that I was concerned about and you mentioned. So you're amending out that this manager would have the authority over the Department of General Services, correct?
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
And what about the Civil Service Commission?
Same thing. All of those would be, yeah.
You'll take them out.
Yep.
So that would be the mayor's direct. So basically, they no longer, does that mean, I haven't read the bill for a while, but that basically, it's the manager becomes a manager, an employer of, a direct boss of any agency, correct?
Correct. Yeah. That's how.
Oh.
Yes.
That helps a lot. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilwoman Sneed, did you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, and Councilman Schleifer? No, okay. Councilman Schleifer's just waiting for his turn. Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, this is Victor. All right, if you're ready to come back to me, I'm not trying to truncate you.
Do it.
I have concerns about the problem here is the single subject. The single subject of this bill is city administrator. When you add in, when you're increasing the power of the city council, it is a different power. And the amendments that I see here don't do that. Don't increase it. Don't say we have a different subject. In other words, now we would have two subjects. We have the city administrator and also empowering the city council with new power. So bottom line is these particular amendments don't do what you would like them to do.
I understand if it couldn't be done right now on the fly, but if you had some time later today, tomorrow, before Monday's meeting, would you be able to craft a sufficient amendment to the purpose clause to broaden the purpose of the amendment such that these would be consistent?
Yeah, I think if we can work with Tony and get the right language down, I think we'd probably be able to pull that together.
Okay, then, Mr. President, if it's okay with you, what I would like to offer is to send your package of amendments to the committee today and have them vote on your amendments as is. And if it passes out, then offer a floor amendment on Monday to add the provisions that we just discussed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, just I would say, yeah, move the amendments, and then you and I should have a discussion about the floor amendment bill on. That's fine.
Okay. Let me check now to see, are there any other questions or comments on these amendments from any of the other participants? Well, let's start with active panelists. If you are a panelist or if you are an attendee. Oh, all right, well, we'll go with you first.
I'm sorry. I just have there's two issues that I want to raise. I think, I do appreciate the changes that the president has made on these amendments. They really take care of almost all of my concerns. And I'm left with just two little ones. Well, maybe not little, but there's enough to raise them to your attention. On page 3 of this bill, you have the amendments remove the removal provisions entirely. And so the question, because among the things that are being removed is the right to remove at the pleasure. Basically, this provision says today, it says that the mayor can remove the municipal officers because they serve at the pleasure of the mayor. This amendment strikes the entire paragraph. And so what we're left with is just the absence of anything anywhere in the charter that says that these individuals can be removed at the pleasure of anyone at this point. So I think there's something that's lacking here, which is just the power to remove these guys at pleasure, and by whom. Is that?
Oh, I think I see what you're saying. That's interesting. I read that as that this was removing that section from the bill. And what you're saying is the way it's actually drafted, it removes that section from the charter.
Actually,
no, it's at the bottom of page, at the bottom of page 6. You can see, like, if you go to the bottom of page 6, I think Tony has put in that the mayor can remove the administrator at any time. Do you see it?
Yeah, I saw that, and that's not the issue, but actually, I think the chair just corrected my misinterpretation of what's going on. Section C is removed from the bill. It's not being removed as a power in the charter. So I think that's correct. My mistake. Let me move on to the other issue I have, which is on, let's see where it is. It's a small issue, which is on page 4 and in section 3A.
All right.
Here, I'll read it. It says, with the approval of the Board of Estimates, the administrator or the head of a municipal department essentially may establish or abolish bureaus in the department. The issue here for me is that the head of a municipal department is working under a city administrator. So I think it would be clearer if you just said the city administrator and delete or the head of a municipal department. It's confusing if you say or, because ultimately let's suppose that a department head goes to the Board of Estimates and says, I want to be able to remove this or reorganize my division. And administrator says, no, I don't like that idea. We are stuck with a problem. We're stuck with a conflict. And I think in order to get rid of that conflict, and as long as you're going to have the city administrator basically be the head over, basically supervise these department directors, it makes sense to delete or the head of the departments.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think that's Mr. Chair, could we make that small change now? You could accomplish that, right?
I think so. I mean, if I'm reading this right and interpreting Vic's comments right, we would be adding the additional amendment of striking. I don't have lines on the interlineated, but in section 3, paragraph A, subsection 1,
20, it's line 23.
line 23.
Page 4, line 23, strike or the head of a municipal department.
Uh-oh. Did we lose him?
Except as
Yeah, I think you're gonna have to take all of it, as otherwise provided by the Department of Public Works.
Yeah, so it should just read that the board of, with approval of the board of estimates, the city administrator could blah blah blah, right?
Yeah, the city administrator.
it would go straight to may establish.
Yeah.
And leave,
Yeah, may establish, right.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yep.
That's a simple change.
Okay, so the committee will note that the package of amendments introduced by the president shall also contain this one, page 4. I'm sorry, did you say line 22?
That is it starts on line 23.
Line 23.
And we strike from
or the
I
head
guess,
of a municipal department, except as otherwise provided for the Department of Public Works.
right. And I am looking,
provided for by the charter.
Right. I am looking, however, just before that, commission or boards. I don't know how often a boards or commission establish bureaus and divisions. So I'm assuming that we can drop that language as well. Elena may want to comment, but I think we can drop that as well. Elena.
Sorry, I think that works. Yeah.
So would we also be dropping commission or board at the end of that?
I would think so.
Okay.
It wouldn't make sense to leave that in with the others out.
Right, so it will read, with the approval of the Board of Estimates, the city administrator may establish and abolish bureaus and divisions within
the
department,
commission or board.
Within a department, commission, or board.
Right.
So we also have to strike that and insert an
Yeah.
All right.
All right. So noted.
I have no other comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vic. I was in the process of asking if there are any other panelists or attendees who are signed in online who wish to make a comment. Please raise your hand using the raise hand function in the participants menu. I see Dan Ferrarco under attendees and no one else under panelists. Sam, can you make Dan a panelist so that he can be seen and talk? All right, Dan, we're getting you a fan upgrade. Hold on a minute.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
This is Matt Stegman from MOGR. Just while we're elevating folks from to panelists, can we also elevate Mira Green from Department of Finance?
Oh,
I don't know. I don't believe she has any comment on this specific bill, but she's here to
she's
back up as needed.
She's already there.
Okay. I apologize.
And also, Sam, if you can confirm for me after Dan's been upgraded, I'm not seeing anyone on the list who is only calling in as a call-in, or I might be reading this wrong. I'm not sure what. Okay, so MJR 33715 is joining from a mobile device, but I don't know if that means tablet or phone. But we don't seem to have anyone here who is only calling in and does not have access to the raise hand function. So I don't think we have to go through the instructions on how we will handle phone-based testimony. Is that fair? Asking Vic or Elena? Okay. Is Dan able to testify yet?
Yes, sir. He's been unmuted. He can go ahead and speak.
Okay. Chair recognizes Mr. Ferrarco, who appears to still be muted, though. There we go.
Hi.
There you go.
I guess I don't have video. That's good. So you can't see me.
We'll use our imagination, Dan.
That's okay. Yeah. Just imagine more hair. I haven't gotten a haircut in 3 months. Just a very quick question. I mean, I know you'd be talking about the 3-member board of estimates. The key ingredients of executive authority are spending money and hiring people. And I'm just, my observation or question is that the CAO, under a 5-member board of estimates, the CAO enjoys the benefits of the consolidated power that the mayor has. If you reduce it to 3 members, if the CAO wants to hire somebody or spend money, it's not really their decision because the mayor can be outvoted on that hiring decision at the board of estimates, and that's really the fundamental difference between our jurisdiction and the other Maryland jurisdictions with this kind of role. Because you look at Andy Klein in Montgomery County. I mean, he has a lot of power, and you create these positions to give that person that kind of power. Same in Baltimore County. That person probably has too much power, which is why they had a huge budget deficit. So it's just a trick here, because if you reduce that, if you take away the mayor's power at the board, it limits what the power that the CAO actually has, and that's something that can be discussed or not in the context of that. But it in my mind, it's a little tough to square these two things in light of the limitations that the CAO has to work under. Because honestly, if the comptroller and city council president don't agree with what the CAO wants, effectively they're in charge, not the CAO. And maybe that's a good thing, but it's certainly a very big difference between our system as we're trying to set up here and Montgomery County, PG County, DC. That's my comment.
Thank you, sir. Mr. President, did you wish to respond?
No, I was just going to say, Dan, thank you for that. So we're going to be having a discussion about the latter, I think, right after this, right? Is that the next one, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, I would add that your comments are well taken and may actually be more appropriate to the next piece of legislation we're going to consider.
And thank you, Dan. Those are things that we're considering about the whole way about how we operate as a city government, to make sure that we are putting in best practices and best policies, but not cutting off one hand and giving it to the other. So thank you.
Okay. Were there any other questions or testimony to be offered on the city administrator charter amendment or the package of amendments for it?
Just a quick one.
Councilwoman Clark.
Just quickly. So I'm back to page 4, item 3, and the changes there. But basically, my question to the president, really, who's going to be our mayor, is Well, I guess that was just the issue that Dan was raising, and maybe you're right. We should discuss it in the next. You all should discuss it with the composition of the Board of Estimates issue. But it begins to look as if to be is giving away his power. As it concerns me, and I just. Once I read the amendments, I can't read them online, so I'll get a copy and maybe I'll ask the committee, I'll call somebody and ask, okay? But I don't want the mayor to be unable to act as mayor and as boss of agencies, because that's what the government is. It's a bunch of agencies serving the public. And I just want to make sure that this doesn't get in between the mayor's responsibilities and power. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council President?
No, duly noted, and trust, this is what we're going to be discussing directly after Councilwoman.
All right. Well, we appear to have heard from all participants who are interested in contributing. So at this point, I would like to ask if there is a motion from the committee regarding the council president's amendments.
I'll make a motion to move the amendment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there a second? Okay, the chair seconds the motion. The amendments are before us. The chair votes aye. Vice Chair?
Aye.
Vice Chair votes aye. Councilwoman McCray?
No.
Councilwoman McCray votes no. The amendments pass 2-1. Is there a motion on the bill as amended?
I'd like to move the amended bill, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The bill is moved as amended, seconded by the chair. The chair votes aye on the amended bill. Councilman Burnett?
Aye.
Councilman Burnett votes aye. Councilwoman McCray?
No.
Councilwoman McCray votes no. By a vote of 2-1, the bill passes out of committee favorably as amended and will be on the agenda for second reader at this coming Monday's meeting, July 13th. Our next item of business is City Council Bill 20-0489, Charter Amendment, Board of Estimates composition. Again, this is a bill that we have already heard and had previous conversations on. At this point, I would recognize Council President Scott and give him a chance to speak to this bill as the sponsor.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you everybody for your approval of the last piece of legislation. This, as we know, is another big change, a bill to discuss a big change to how the city of Baltimore functions and operates. And we've been having this conversation for quite some time. This piece of legislation has deep reaching impacts to every single function of city government. And knowing and understanding that, and knowing and hearing what we just heard in the previous hearing about what this kind of change would mean to how we function and operate as a city, especially during a time where we're going through crisis of COVID. We know the economic fallout. We have to do deep research on this bill. My team and I have looked at the other cities that have Board of Estimates. Most notably, only a few remain, St. Louis and Minneapolis and Minnesota, that have Board of Estimates. The structures are different in both places. In St. Louis, they have simply a 3-member board of elected officials. However, in that case, most of the major contracts are actually not voted on by their board. They're decided by a separate entity that consists of just agency heads. And in Minnesota, they have a much broader Board of Estimates. And what I am asking this committee to do now, and let everyone know in the public that I remain 100% committed to figuring out how we are going to deal with the Board of Estimates and having this bill be voted on one way or another before this term is out. But now is not the time for that, because there are too many questions, as you just heard, a lot of concerns, a lot more research that has to be done to make sure that we are moving in the appropriate way with this piece of legislation. We cannot operate in the haste of trying to make change and actually be hurting and harming the transparency, the more accountability, the more 21st century government structure that we're calling for. So we have done some research, and there's a lot more that has to be done. We will deal with this piece of legislation, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, before this term is up. But now is not the time for that, because there's a lot more questions that have to be asked for me, for law, for many other individuals.
Thank you, Mr. President. Are there any questions or comments from members of the committee? First, Councilman Burnett or Councilwoman McCray?
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Other council members in attendance, Councilwoman Clark?
I would just note that I'm happy to see this thing go underground for a while. But one of the things I'm concerned about is the effect back. As Dan was saying, we're moving forward with the other, the city manager. And that person is going to, I presume, rely on the support of the mayor through some kind of construct of the Board of Estimates. In other words, do we feel good about moving forward with that before knowing what the mayor's power, whether the mayor actually has the power to give the manager to do the things this bill anticipates? I don't know if there's an answer to that question, but it's a question until. But I'm very happy to see that this composition of BOE is going to get some study, because I support strong mayor form of government. I really do. Somebody's got to be held responsible. And I just, that's all I'm worried about. I'm a citizen.
Sorry, Council President?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Councilwoman, and the administrator. So Councilwoman, I have to say administrator, because though I know you understand the difference in the public, some folks take city manager as it being a manager council form of government versus an administrator. So we have to be very intentional about saying that. And listen, we agree. And I think that you and I'll give you a call to talk about some of the other options that we have, but knowing this is why we are quote unquote not driving the car looking at this change, but taking our foot off the gas, because we actually have to get it right. When you look at the fact that you have so many different options, you have the options that they have, you have many, in most cities have now just totally abolished Board of Estimates. We have to get it right, and we have to do the work of getting it right. So for now, we're going to take our foot off the gas, do the tough work, the due diligence to see what's the best option for us. And we will move forward with something, but we're not going to do it in a hastily fashion that would just throw our system into chaos, especially in the moment that we're in right now.
Are you moving you're moving forward, but not for the ballot Board of Estimates? You're moving forward, but letting the deadlines get passed for the charter amendment? Yeah,
so the commitment, Mary Councilwoman.
No, call me Mary Cat.
The commitment is to have this bill be voted up or down by the end of the term, but that's not going to happen.
By the end of the term, yeah. Gotcha. Thank you.
The original commitment, but yeah.
And I don't know if this was what Vic was originally going to say, but one of the questions I had for the law department was to confirm my understanding that if we, as the council, were to pass a charter amendment later this year, after the deadline for it to be on the ballot for this general election in November, a subsequently passed and either signed by the mayor or becoming what would pass for law without a signature, if it were to move forward later this term, it would then be on the ballot in 2022?
I don't know the answer to that question. And most bills, all the bills die at the end of because the session ends. Unless Elena has researched that, I don't know the answer to that question. And Elena's on, so maybe she can say something.
I'm not sure the answer to that question either. Generally, if we weren't about to end the term, they would survive until the next general election. But I think in this case, they've been passed by the council, but they haven't. Give us a chance to look into that one, because I don't want to steer you wrong on that. But
okay.
That's an interesting question.
Well, that will certainly inform a lot of the work that this committee continues to do after the late July, early August deadline that we've been working with.
I have a feeling, though, if the mayor does not sign it before the deadline, never mind. I don't want to go there without being sure. So
okay.
let us play out the scenarios for you, and we'll get back to you.
Excellent. Were there any other questions from Councilman Schleifer or Councilwoman Sneed? Then we're going to go with Vic.
Thank you. One of the things I raised about this bill the last time was the possibility of stalemate. You have a three-member council, three-member board. One recuses themselves. We have two people who would vote, but if one votes aye and the other one votes nay, then the item is tabled. What you asked me to do and what I've done is to talk to the Board of Public Works. So I called the director, the general counsel for the Board of Public Works, and I said, well, do you have a workaround on this situation? They have no workaround. What happens is that if in that situation there is a stalemate, once again, somebody's recused themselves, somebody votes in favor of an item, another one votes against the item, what happens? Basically, the item is tabled forever until it comes back and some sort of resolution can happen. So that is a situation, and he said that it happens rarely, and if it happens, when we have a three-member board, we'd have to anticipate how often that might happen for us, because essentially so many things are important that go through the Board of Estimates. We really can't have a situation, or it must be a rare situation, where nothing moves because one member has recused and two members can't see eye to eye.
Council President.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you. And this is one of the concerns that I had as well. And what my staff and we did, we actually reached out to St. Louis that does have that three-member board, and that's when we were informed that is a less of a concern for them, because they have a separate board that does the main contracts, which cuts away at the attempts to be it more open and transparent, which is another reason why I made the statement that I made, is that it's going to be important that all of us work together to really look at this in its entirety, right? Do we need to looking at the models, looking at all the options, so that we can continue to have some open and transparent process that our citizens can see and be involved in when you're talking about $500 million a year in contracts, but that is also one that's more aligned with being more democratic, without just totally throwing away our system and throwing it into chaos. I believe that in the weeks and months that come ahead, that all of the smart people here and on this panel, but also in city government, we can do that with tough work and come up with that.
Thank you. Were there any other questions from anyone else on the panel?
And Mr. Chair, I'm going to have to check out for another meeting. So thank you, and thank you to the committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Well, actually, let me just ask if there were any other questions from any of the other attendees, specifically for the president. I see Dan has his hand up. It's unclear if he took his hand down from the last time or if this is new. So, can we unmute Dan?
Yes, no, it is new, and I actually had a suggestion for you. I mean, and to dovetail on Victor's comments, the reason why stalemates at the BPW don't really matter is because the BPW's role is actually very small. And one solution to the fundamental question the body here has to decide is what's your view of executive authority? You have a city administrator, you're deciding you want someone in charge. Now, it's either going to be the mayor or it's going to be the city administrator. Practically speaking, I don't think a city administrator is meaningfully different than a chief of staff, and they're still accountable to the mayor. I think all the amendments are good. But then if you dilute executive authority with this change, as I already said, you're making a different point. It matters for us in a way that it doesn't matter at the BPW, because the important point about the BPW is it only hears contracts over $1 million. You could make that rule right now. You already have a hiring process. I can see at least one member is disagreeing with that, and I don't care for it because I've made myself quite clear that this is an anachronism that could go away completely. You have a hiring process. You have a human resources department. There's really no reason for the Board of Estimates to approve every hire. And note, the BPW doesn't have any role in hiring. They don't approve hires in city government. Budget, you guys are talking about increasing power for the council on the budget. I don't think that's a bad idea at all. None of the other counties have the Board of Estimates to go to. And the BPW doesn't have any budget role, except, as we just learned, in a completely undemocratic fashion, where because of the happenstance that the legislature is out of session, 3 people get to rewrite the entire state budget. And that's what Hogan just tried to do. He just decided to move around hundreds of millions of dollars because he can. And in my view, as a taxpaying citizen, that's nonsense. But that's the rare instance where the BPW actually plays a role in the budget. So you could simply remove budget and hiring from our Board of Estimates, let the purchasing office and handle all the other, which admittedly we have issues there. I'm aware, but in principle, you don't need every box of pencils approved by the Board of Estimates, which is the system that we have now. You could do, if you wanted to model it at all. And again, we have a Board of Estimates because Maryland invented a Board of Public Works in 1789 or whatever. It's ridiculous that we still do it this way, but if we want to, you could just model it that way. And in that regard, it at least harmonizes what you're trying to do with the city administrator. Because the city administrator doesn't need to be God of contracting, and they shouldn't be. There should be a different process for $1 million contracts. But they would have executive authority where executive authority matters, which is in spending and hiring. So one could take that approach. You already have most of the contracting process in place. The real problem with the Board of Estimates, in my view and my experience in City Hall, is that the Board of Estimates actually conceals what goes on, particularly at DPW, which is a black box for a lot of us. The contracting process and what actually happens there, it's not something most people really know anything about. And it's not that level of the process is not transparent. The discussions at the Board of Estimates are, but frankly, by the time large contracts have gotten to the Board of Estimates, everything's been decided. And it's very difficult to have a meaningful process there. So that's just a suggestion. If we're going to persist with the Board of Estimates, you could do that, have a public airing of large contracts, because ultimately that's what, anytime you see an argument at the Board of Estimates, it's about a large contract. Now there's always petty fighting. Someone will not like a hire or this or that, but the big deal is always a very large contract. So one could take that approach. That's up to you to decide. I mean, but you could very easily reduce the Board of Estimates authority to $1 million contracts alone. And since the council is never out of session, there's no need for it to have a budget role. And then just finally, I would just make the point about Minneapolis. You know, if you look at St. Louis and Minneapolis, like the question, particularly these days, is do we want to emulate those cities? Minneapolis, their structure, just, you know, I'm sure the council president's already aware of this if he's still on. You know, that's really a council of governments because, you know, Minneapolis has two very large bureaucracies, and the beautiful parks that before last month was the main thing everyone associated with Minneapolis. Those are run by a very massive bureaucracy, not dissimilar to the like Maryland parks down in PG and Montgomery County. So the allocation of resources in Minnesota and in Minneapolis has to be handled at their board because it's the only place where those two bureaucracies can allocate resources. And we don't have anything equivalent to that. Like there's no separate, you know, we don't have a separate parks department that needs to meet with the rest of the city government. So I don't, you know, I don't know that what Minneapolis is doing is something we need to emulate. So those are my comments. But that's a quick answer to this. That's a way to get out of this if you want to continue to have a Board of Estimates. That would be one, to model it directly on what the BPW does.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Did any of the other participants have any questions for Dan? All right, well, seeing none, and seeing no other participants with their hands raised, nor attendees, we are going to move on now to the third and final bill being considered today, which is City Council 20-0545 Charter Amendment Term Limits. This is the first hearing for this bill in its current incarnation. I know that the sponsor this is technically the reprise from a version originally offered at the beginning of this term. So before we go to agency reports, I would offer the sponsor an opportunity to make a few opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to have a hearing so soon between the introduction of this bill the second time and the first time. My time waiting for a hearing now averages out to a little over 6 months, so thank you. This bill is different than many other charter amendments that are being heard. Like the sponsor had mentioned, this is not the first time this is being discussed. It's not the first time it's being discussed this term. And so this bill is exactly the same as the initial introduction almost 4 years ago. And so technically we've had multiple hearings on this exact topic. This has been discussed by the council. It's been discussed in communities. It's been discussed far and wide. And the overwhelming feedback has been positive. And so term limits is something that at least 9 of our surrounding jurisdictions currently have some element of term limits. There's pros and cons to everything. Some of the pros to term limits is that, you know, and this isn't a lifetime ban, so I just want to clarify that. This is you can only serve 3 consecutive terms. You could move up or you could move out. And so that is something that responsible organizations do quite frequently. They have, board of directors that can only serve a few terms, and then after those, go in the living room. Sorry about that. They can serve a few terms, and then they have to move out, and that's typically done to make sure that there's no corruption and there's no other issues. I got to get a lock on my office door. Okay, you want to join us? Here, watch this instead, okay? No. We got a little helper here. So it helps. So basically, give me 1 second. I'm sorry.
Sam, we've got to work on getting some kind of hold music or something that we can play when our colleagues with what are we supposed to be calling them, our coworkers, when we're working from home.
Yeah. So I mean, they have a limit of how long they go before getting a snack or before they get bored of whatever activity you put them in front of. So being that this is the last hearing of this set of three, I knew my time was limited. But anyways, term limits. So it has a lot of advantages to it, and so this is really just a good government responsible bill. I know people have had concerns about how many conversations are being done about charter amendments. That should not be a concern in this case, being that it has been discussed many times by this council and during this term, and the benefits would be paying dividends for many years to come. When you as an elected official or I as an elected official understand that we only have a certain amount of time to serve in the positions we serve, what we do know is that we're going to be our own constituents one day. And so we will be serving every day knowing that there will be a day where we're just going to be an ordinary citizen. And so it helps people shape decisions based on what is in the best interest of their districts and the city as a whole. Too often we see people in positions thinking that elected office is a lifetime appointment because re-election rates are so high. And although that certainly should not be the case, we should be encouraging the younger generation to get involved and giving them an opportunity to do so. And so by having term limits, it engages more people in the process, encourages more people to run for office, and also just encourages more turnover. And we have that steady stream of smooth transitions because people aren't losing a race per se. They are moving on. And so when you understand that that's how the transition is going to happen, we will have a lot smoother transitions than many of us have been encountering when we do come into office. So those are some of the the basics of this bill, and I'm happy to answer any questions that any committee members or anybody has on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. I'm going to go through the agencies that have replied to see if they need to make any changes to their report or if they wish to expand on their comments. I'm going to start with the Finance Department. Mara, are you going to be speaking for Finance or someone else?
Yes, I'll be speaking. Thank you,
Okay.
Chair. Finance is opposed to this bill. It's just based on the stances that we've been taking with recent charter amendments. We believe that these discussions that are major changes to the form and structure of government should be had through the Charter Review Commission so that there can be this discussion like was just happening with the BOE composition of how these amendments really interplay with each other and what that interaction will be like. Our response includes a fiscal analysis that we engaged with David Randall, the executive director of ERS, around to talk about the impact on the elected officials' retirement system. By limiting to 3 consecutive terms, this could result in more individuals becoming vested in the system because starting in 2016, there was a limit of needing only 12 years to be vested. And so if more people are coming on and able to stay in their positions for 12 years, then there could be more individuals vested. However, there could also be lowering of terms of service, so lowering benefits in that way, which David, I believe, can speak more to. But based on actuarial assumptions, the legislation is expected to have minimal fiscal impact. In addition, our response included just some research, which the sponsor alluded to about on-term limits and the prevalence in other jurisdictions and structures in Maryland and across the country.
So, first, I'm going to take the chair's prerogative to get a clarification on that. it sounded like you said that because it would be a term limit of 3 terms or 12 years, that might somehow increase the number of people vesting. And I'm unclear on how having no term limits and going to having a term limit would increase the number of people who served for 3 terms.
So it would be that if folks are only able to serve for 3 terms, and looking at some members of the council now that have been serving more than 3 terms, they would have to step down, so another individual would come in. That could increase, rather than having no term limits and being on for longer.
So I'm sorry. It's the concern is that instead of having one person who retires from the city having vested once and collecting whatever pension is applicable for having served 6 or 7 terms, it would be worse for the city to have 2 people who had served for 3 terms each and vested separately?
So I might defer to Mr. Randall on this, but from the conversations that we had would be an increase in the number of people that would be vested, but because they would be vested at lower, because of lesser terms, lesser years of service, there might be therefore a lesser payout or a lesser benefit for someone who served 3 terms than 6, but
right.
People. So there could be a balancing, but we're not sure. We haven't been able to do a further analysis with our actuarial to give that further projection, but I'll let Mr. Randall provide more detail if that's okay.
Mr. Randall, you're muted. Mr. Randall, okay, there you go.
I'm good now?
Yeah.
You can hear me? Okay, very good. Yes, just to mirror from is absolutely correct. The 12-year, the 3-year term is for a period of 12 years. Once you have 12 years of service in the elected officials retirement system, you are definitely vested. That means you're entitled to a retirement benefit. Although you can't collect that benefit until you're age 55, and it plus is going to be a much lower benefit than someone who was vested for 20 years. It's a significant difference. But when you have a term limit, you have the opportunity of having more retirees retiring for 12 years than you do if there's no term limit. You could have one person retiring after 24 years. So there's only one person after 24 versus you could have 3 or 4, 12 years of service. Although the benefit would be smaller, that's why it's kind of hard to say if there's going to be a cost, because their benefit is going to be smaller. And then you have to look at life expectancy as well. So how much longer is that 55-year-old going to live collecting a smaller benefit than the one after 25 years? Okay. They may only live 10 years at getting a higher benefit. So it can offset. But also keep in mind, with the term limit, once a member reaches the 3 terms, they're going to be replaced. So the system will continue to get an active contribution to offset the additional cost of more retirees. So we will always continue to get a contribution, because it's not like you're eliminating the position. You will still have that position. We will still get the contribution from the present member. However, we will be paying more retirees a lower benefit. Does that make sense?
I think I see. I think I understand the direction you guys are going in. I'm actually going to step away from the plate and make room for the sponsor, Councilman Schleifer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so, Mr. Randall, number one.
You're breaking up. I'm sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. If you serve 4 terms, are you then able to start collecting your pension right away, regardless of age?
It depends on when you started. So what we just explained was effective 2016. 2016 law changed. It was prior to 2016 with 16 years of service. It didn't matter what age. And what the law changed was anytime after 12 years of service, you are vested. However, you can't collect the benefit till you're age 55. So to answer your question, it all depends. If you have a youngster who has 16 years of service, yeah, right. So then you can start collecting your benefit right away. However, if you have a youngster who only served 3 terms, that's 12 years, they can't collect their benefit till age 55.
Right, and so that's kind of, and if you don't mind, if you can just mute your computer while I'm asking the question because I'm getting feedback. Thank you. So that's also something that I'm getting at, just to respond to Laura's comments, is that, you know, I take myself as an example. I'm going to be fully vested by the age of 38, 39, and so I personally would need to wait 16 years to collect anything. So that money is just sitting there accumulating in that meantime. And part of what this bill will do, it will encourage younger people like myself to get engaged in the process and to run for office. And so, you know, I've looked at the numbers. We had this conversation 4 years ago. I don't remember exactly who was at the table regarding what it looked like, but what the end result was that we had seen how when you have people, if you have one person serving 6 terms instead of a person serving 2 people serving 3 terms, you know, we're getting a percentage every single year. And so you actually may end up faring, the city may end up faring in the account, the retirement account may end up faring a lot better by having new people coming in and then not being able to touch it for that period of time. And so it can go in any direction. But either way, I mean, we have these benefits for people to be able to use them. And it wouldn't be the worst thing if the elected officials' retirement accounts, you know, were similar and worked like the employees of the city's accounts worked. And so right now, the elected officials system has plenty of funds in it, is overfunded.
Yes, they are. I agree. Yes, they are.
What's that?
Right. That was one of my responses. The city, the elected official out of all the retirement plans is probably the most sustainable. It's the only one that's like 153% funded. They're the only ones that's over 100%. And in my response, I definitely said that, you know, the city hasn't made a contribution to elected officials in the last 5 years. And we don't anticipate that changing, even with this term limit bill. But I just wanted you guys to be aware of the opportunity that as a youngster like yourself, when you do reach the age 55, you're going to get a much lower benefit instead if you had served 5 terms.
Right.
So it goes both ways. So it's yes, you're saving the city money and the plan money, but also as a member of the elected officials, your benefit is also going to be smaller. So right. I'm trying to say I wouldn't run for election just for a retirement benefit.
Correct. And that's and your comments and the analysis kind of play into the whole purpose of this bill, which is that you're not supposed to be running for office and serving an elected official for how it will benefit you. I can tell you that certainly for the hours that we all put in, well, at least most of us put in, it certainly it comes out to well below minimum wage, and we're doing this because we're passionate about doing it. And so in looking through the numbers, I really do think it's a moot point, all factors considered. And frankly, and then when we get into the life expectancy conversation, I think that's the only place where finance would have a good argument, because the longer you serve on the city council, the lower your life expectancy is going to be, because if you're serving at the same rate of speed that a lot of us serve, there's just no way you're going to make it that long with the amount of stress and headaches and and just working around the clock and lack of sleep that most of us get. And so, I think the whole conversation about retirement system is a moot point. I know originally I proposed the bill 4 years ago. The mayor's office, the now mayor, then council president, wanted it to be changed to the way it is now. I made that change based on having the 3 terms, and I just don't factor that this the what ifs about how many people will be vested is going to actually play out. Considering what this will do is bring down the average age of those who end up stepping down, because after 12 years, you'd be a whole lot less than what we've seen in previous years of people actually retiring and having vested at full capacity and making as much money out as they were making in. And so,
Councilman,
it's more damaging to the retirement system in the long run. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would remind you that we still have other agencies to hear reports from.
Okay, good.
And I wanted to try to get through them. Next up would be the law department. Did either Mr. Petra or Mr. Davala wish to comment on their report?
This is Vic Turvala. We are going. We're prepared to approve the bill for form and legal sufficiency. I just wanted to make it clear, if in case it wasn't already, is that any elected official who is at the end of 2024, if you've served 3 terms, then you have to take a break under this bill. So it starts now. It starts if it's approved. We're beginning this bill. Effect would really be in 2024. If anybody has served 3 terms, they have to take a break.
Thank you, Mr. Davala. I'm thinking through the roster right now that 3 terms, I'm pretty certain that of the Democratic nominees for local office in 2020, the only person that would conceivably affect would be Council Vice President Middleton.
That's my calculus as well.
Who will have served 3 complete terms at the end of this current term. And so I would imagine that it might be worthwhile to have that brought to her attention in the before the full council votes on this. Let's see. Next up, we had this was also referred to the office of the Comptroller, Mr. Knight.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. The Comptroller's office, Jim Knighton for the Comptroller's office. Comptroller's office stands by its position as stated in the impact statement, which is we support the bill.
Okay, thank you very much. And then last, but by no means least, Mr. Stegman, I believe this was referred to the mayor's office.
It was indeed. So, yeah, conceptually, the mayor is in favor of term limits and looks forward to seeing whatever work product the council sends to his desk.
Artfully worded. Okay, are there any questions from the members of the committee about any of the agency reports or for the sponsor, Councilman Burnett or Councilwoman McCray?
Just a broader question for you, Mr. Chair. There's on Monday, there was a similar piece of legislation introduced. Is the intention to wait for the agency reports from that bill as well before moving forward on this?
So, thank you for raising that point. I have tried through this process to be the kind of chair I like to have as a council person, and that is one who gives the sponsor of legislation the courtesy of moving at the speed that they prefer. In my conversations with the mayor's office, there was not a desire to move quickly with the term limits charter amendment that was introduced by the mayor on Monday. the mayor's intention is to have that bill introduced for conversational purposes, but not with the expectation or hope that it would pass in time to be approved and make it onto the ballot this fall, as opposed to Councilman Schleifer, who I believe would like to see his version of the term limits bill approved in sufficient time for it to be considered by the voters this year. So my intention with the cooperation of the committee is to deal with each of these at the speed that their respective sponsors would like to deal with them. And so later this fall, we would have a hearing on the charter amendments that were introduced on behalf of the mayor this past Monday, so that we can have some public conversation about them. Whether they move forward later this fall would be dependent on how the law department gets back to us in terms of what does it mean if we pass a charter amendment, but after the deadline for it to be on this fall's general election ballot. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying that we will have a hearing on the mayor's version of this, but I don't expect that hearing to be for several weeks or maybe even months.
Okay.
Any other questions for Councilman Schleifer from any of the panelists? Then let's go check out the attendees. Oh, look at that. Dan's hand is up. I see no other hands. If we could unmute Mr. Ferrarco, the chair recognizes Dan Ferrarco.
Well, I thought there'd be more people. But I'm just a question, because I can't reconcile what Victor just said with the language of the bill. Like when I looked at the bill, it says after December 9, 2020, which implies to me that the count starts when you're all sworn in this December. So all prior terms have been excluded. And my point would be that what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So if you serve the terms you've already served have to count. Like if you believe, and I do not think term limits are a good idea or necessary, but if you believe they are, they should apply to everybody. So so Victor said, once this passes, it's just 3 terms. But the bill doesn't say that unless it's been amended to remove that qualifier. Because after December 20, a person who has been popularly elected to serve 3 consecutive terms, that would basically mean this doesn't apply to the prior terms served by, for example, Councilwoman Middleton.
Dan, I think you're reading this wrong, but I'm going to let Vic have first crack at it because the way I'm reading it, I understand why Vic made the statement he made. So, Vic, do you want to take a swing?
I appreciate Dan's reading, and I can see where he's going with it, but that's now how I've been reading this bill.
Yeah.
We've had a number of bills like this, and we've sort of fooled around with the language, and I thought this was pretty good the way it's stated. So, Dan, I think.
I mean, if that's the understood reading, that's fine. I would just say in that case, just say 3 terms, and that there would be no doubt. But if there's no doubt amongst you all, it just seems to me, if I'm a council person who's already served 2 terms, I'm going to say, no. This says the count starts this December. So I have 3 terms to go. That's my limit. Now, if you don't think that's going to be an issue, then I defer to you all. But there's no need for that date restriction. If all you're trying to do is say you can only serve 3 terms, just say you can only serve 3 terms, and we can all determine how many terms you've all served without, there doesn't need to be an effective date. It's just my suggestion. My other question, or just really a point, is that I think you probably need to make you need to make allowance for the possibility of a very drastic redistricting. I mean, there are now 3 bills to reduce the size of the council. And I think the most recent one is now, I think, my favorite, coming from the mayor, which would just have 5 districts and two at large. And I'm not joking about that. So if you expand the sizes of the districts, I actually think you need to have a clause there that says, something that says this doesn't apply if the number of seats are reduced, because then the seats are larger, and I don't think if the number of seats, districted seats, for example, is cut in half by any action you all take, I don't think it's. I think that's apples and oranges. That's just my observation. So I think if you cut the districts in half, I think that resets the clock, because that's a different seat. It's a different district, and I don't see why somebody should be term limited out when the job has been rewritten. That's again another one. If you line all these things up together to consider how they all work together, that's to me, because that's not particularly fair, because you're changing the rules and then you're still saying someone can't run for what's effectively a new job. So that's just an observation.
So I will point out, and I'd be happy for some clarification from Vic on this. I would point out that the reason I thought that clause after December 9th of 2020 was in there was because technically charter amendments go into effect after they're ratified by the general election, which means if it wasn't for that clause, then on the day after it's the day that the charter amendment is passed in the first week of November, any council person who was already in their 4th term or greater
would be automatically disqualified or something?
Would be automatically disqualified from office for the remaining month of their term.
I think you'd have to. To me, I think you would have to add a clause saying it has that retroactive effect, because then you'd basically be saying you're undoing an election that happened subsequent to the charter amendment.
Well, no.
Maybe that's what I don't know.
What I'm saying is that's what that clause avoids.
Yeah.
So that clause makes it clear that this really doesn't go into effect until the beginning of the next term, at which point, if there is anybody who has been already in service for 3 terms, they can't serve for a 4th.
Yeah. Oh, no. I see the concern. Again, because you're talking about arguably someone's livelihood here. And if someone likes being a council person and they're being told you cannot run again, and if they want to fight about it, obviously you've made your record here, but one could also just say, blah, 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 provided that anyone who just won an election, and anyone who's won an election in the circumstances you just described may fulfill the term to which they were just elected.
No offense, but we don't need to brainstorm wordsmithing, because we have previous incarnations of this bill where that language to make sure it was understood that this would only apply going forward. We have access to that language.
Let me add, can I add, Mr. Chair, that my bill report says expressly what the interpretation would be. So we have intent in the bill report. So if anybody has any problem with what is intended here, and this discussion backs it up, unless the sponsor has a different view about what this is intended to do, the law department would say, and has said, that this bill would bar anybody from seeking a third term after 2024?
Fourth term.
Fourth term.
Councilman Schleifer?
Yeah, so first of all, just to go back to where that line came from, and I certainly have a couple questions for Vic on it, but where that line came from, was the case of Councilman Costello, who was serving out a partial term after Councilman Cole, thank you. Hopefully he's not watching this. After he served. So the point was to make sure that it is 3 complete full terms from then. And so he wouldn't be disqualified because he was in the term before and it was not a complete term. So you can do 3 complete terms, and so he would have been in a 4th term, but only in a partial capacity.
The language on the bill is popularly elected. And so when you're filling in for somebody else, you actually haven't been popularly elected. You've basically been just appointed by the city council. We're talking about popular election. If you've had 3 popular terms, you've got to take a break.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me. I guess as long as the bill sponsor agrees that as of 2028, if he'd run again in 2024, win, by 2028 he couldn't run again because he'd already been elected in 2016 and 2020 and 2024. If that's not the understanding, then the language is not clear. As long as it is, then if it's clear to everybody, including the sponsor, then that's not an issue. It just reads differently to me as a lawyer who's new to the language. But as long as that's an understanding, that if the sponsor wins again in 24, this language precludes him from running again in 28.
I'm looking back at
One of my colleagues just calling me.
I'm looking back at a version of a term limits bill from the previous term in which this was the way that it was worded. It said, a person who, after December 7th, 2016, which we would update to December 9th, 2020, a person who, after this date, serves 3 consecutive popular elective terms of office as a member of the city council is ineligible to succeed her or himself for the term immediately following the 3rd of these consecutive terms. That is the way that it was written in last term's term limit bill to make it clear that the clock would not start until the next term.
Yeah, that's what that language sounds like to me.
Yeah. So if it is the sponsor's intent to have the clock start with the next term, then that is the language that he could propose as an amendment to his own bill. If it is not the sponsor's intent to have the clock start in the next term, then we would just pass the bill as is.
Well, yeah, I would like to know from the sponsor what is that.
Yeah, so we can get some clarity from legislative reference also. I'm not sure if there is legislative reference on.
I don't think. Oh yeah, Tony's on the call.
Tony's on. Okay, and we can just have a conversation just like on the other bill with law and legislative reference to get to the bottom of interpretation, and then if there's a need for an amendment, we can go ahead and make an amendment.
Well, I think as long as the sponsor agrees with everything else that was just said, then there's no issue here. The question is, for all the people who are on this call who were just elected in 2016, does the term you served starting in 2016 count toward the 3 or not under this bill?
As written, it does.
Well, you're saying that.
Well, no, the law department said that, and I agreed with them.
And I guess the sponsor agrees with that. That's what I'm asking. Councilman Slifer, you agree with that?
With the law department's interpretation?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I have to. It was written by legislative reference, which is why I want to get legislative reference and law department in a meeting together to make sure that we're both that everybody is interpreting it at the same time. But what the intention of the bill is that someone serving 3 consecutive terms will either have to run for a different position, council president or mayor or comptroller. I'm sorry, Mr. Henry.
Don't be.
Or just move out, and you could always come back after that. And Councilwoman Clark was a case in point where she had done 3 terms, I think, ran for council president. Came back. Was that 2 terms? Yeah, she explained it to me. I don't remember the sequence, but she basically was her tenure on the council fits into what this bill was, and so that's that's how we interpret what the bill's intentions are. And if any of my colleagues think otherwise, I'm more than happy that either way we can get a meeting with the law department, legislative reference, and if there's a need for an amendment, I'm certainly open to that. This bill has not changed since the first introduction 4 years ago, and so if there's a need for a different date or something like that, I'm certainly open-minded to that.
Okay, but that just to interject, Councilman. I mean, I think what you just said is a little different, because the chair said the language from 4 years ago was different than the language that we're looking at today. So,
so just to be clear, that was not from 4 years ago. That was from 8 years ago. I was not referring to the bill that Councilman Schleifer introduced at the beginning of this term. I was referring to a bill from the last council term.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you introduced that bill, right? 8 years ago?
Yes. Where it was, ironically enough, a compromise between the bill that you have before us right now and the version that the mayor introduced on Monday, or had introduced on Monday, in that the version from 8 years ago had 2 terms as the limit for citywide and 3 terms as the limit for district council people. But I feel like we have exhausted this particular aspect of the discussion. I think the sponsor has made his feelings pretty clear. Did anyone else have any questions or need to make any comments before we move forward with the committee's business? Seeing no other hands raised, I would ask if any member of the committee is willing to make a motion on this bill.
Wait, I'm a little confused, Mr. Chair. I feel comfortable moving forward once we have that meeting or the clarity from both of those departments. We sort of know a little bit more clear on what the actual answer is to that question that's on the table.
Okay. Councilman Schleifer?
Yes, I would just say again, just like the previous bill that the committee just passed, and if there's a need for changes on second reader, more than happy to do that. But as far as the timeline is concerned, the only way to actually be able to get this on the ballot is to proceed.
So I guess let me be explicit then. If we were to move the bill as is, the bill written as is would effectively include any terms already served when the clock starts on December 9th of 2020. So for council members that were elected in 2016, you would have already served the first of your 3 terms. for council members that were elected first in 2007, you would have already served 3 terms and so would not be eligible to serve in an additional term, which admittedly could create an interesting legal situation in that Councilwoman Middleton, if she is elected in the general election at the same time that this charter amendment is approved by the voters, we would be creating a situation where the charter would be invalidating her ability to serve the members of her district who had just reelected her. And so it seems to me that there almost certainly would be a need to have some amendment crafted by the law department and legislative reference to avoid that situation if this bill is approved by the voters at the same time that Council Vice President Middleton is. So my question would be, if the sponsor was willing to commit to introducing that as a floor amendment on Monday after it has been crafted by legislative reference and DLR, would that alleviate Councilman Burnett's concerns about how this bill moves forward?
So is the concern with the timeline, walk me through that piece of it, because that is my primary concern, is, you know, the voters just reelected Councilman Middleton. I don't think it's appropriate for this body to effectively invalidate the outcome of that democratic process by moving this forward without that being rectified. And so that's where I'm concerned about.
So to answer your question, Mr. Chair, like yes, I am committed. If there's a need for a floor amendment, look, this bill isn't about me. I mean, I'm the youngest person on this council, so I would argue to say that this has an impact on me greater than an impact on anybody else, just on that mere fact. And so I'm committed on doing what's right, you know, and doing, you know, what's the wishes of the council. So certainly I am committed. If there's a need for an amendment, I'm happy to get with Councilman Burnett and any other members of the council, the law department, and legislative reference. Maybe we can set up a meeting or something else if there's questions that just need to get answered. Yeah, if there's a need for an amendment, I am committed to it. I am not, you know, married to the fact that it's got to be my way or the highway. I've always been very diplomatic on anything I've worked on. And so if there's a need to change things in one way or another, the mayor's office has an amendment that they're interested in, I'm very open to working with anyone and everyone on what that is. Being that we have the timeline that's in front of us, I would ask that that this get put to a vote. And yes, if there's a need for an amendment that the council members seek, and the member seeks in one way or another, that there's a consensus on the council for it, it will be presented to the council to take a vote on.
Councilman Burnett, is that satisfactory?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, that's my primary concern and would dictate my position on the floor of the council.
Okay. All right. Well, all right. So all that being said and clarified, is there a motion to move this bill favorably?
I move the bill.
Moved by Councilman Burnett. Is there a second? Chair seconds it. So the bill is before us. The chairman votes yes. Vice Chair Burnett?
Yes.
Vice Chair Burnett votes yes. Councilwoman McCray?
No.
Councilwoman McCray votes no. By a vote of 2-1, this bill moves forward favorably and will be on second reader at the next council meeting on Monday, July 13th. That concludes the business of the committee at this time. Thank you all for being in attendance. And this committee, I'm sorry. Thank you all for attending today's Equity and Structure Committee hearing. Please check the area around your seat to make certain that you have everything that you brought with you. I'm just kidding. You don't have to worry about that because you're home. This committee is now in recess. Everybody have a good day.